From nearly getting killed in a horrific crash and burning almost half his face, to making a comeback just 6 weeks later and finish 4th. Here's what you need to know about Niki Lauda's inspirational comeback to F1, starting with when Lauda lost control at the Green Hell. The Ferrari legend was set to defend his world championship in 1976, but the Nürburgring had other plans for him. Lauda was flying past everyone in that race, but when Lauda accelerated his car past a left turn, he lost control of the Ferrari completely, and at a speed of almost 200 kilometers per hour, Lauda crashed straight into the green embankment. Only horrific things happen when you crash at such speeds, and that's exactly what happened that day. The car immediately caught fire and started burning. There were flames everywhere around the car. Niki's fellow driver also crashed into the fireball and had no idea what was ahead of him, but the man of the hour was Arturo Merzario, the man who stopped his car and ran to rescue Lauda after hearing him screaming from the fireball. And with the help of guards, Arturo got Niki out of his car, but the Austrian was unconscious and had suffered some pretty serious injuries. No one thought that he could survive that fire. For someone who had only won the championship last year and was on his way to defending it, it looked like a terrible ending to one of the most illustrious careers in motorsport history. It was almost over for him. People thought Lauda would never get back in an F1 car again, and they weren't wrong to think that. After what happened, anyone would think like that. Niki suffered serious burns to his body and face. Almost half of his face was completely burnt. His lungs were also damaged after inhaling toxic fumes from the fire. He left the venue in a coma, and there were even fears he might not make it. The doctors used to suck fluids from his lungs for several days, and it was a very painful process. What was even worse was that Niki didn't remember anything about the accident, or maybe it was a blessing in disguise, because what happened 40 days later was unthinkable. Lauda decided to make a comeback after just 6 weeks. It was shocking and unbelievable. Despite his doctors and everyone else suggesting that he shouldn't, Lauda decided to put on his helmet once again and get inside an F1 car. Unsurprisingly, it was very painful for him to wear a helmet again after suffering those burns to his face. It sweats a lot inside the helmet. Combine that with the burns on his face. No one can even imagine how bad it hurts. But Niki was determined. He had decided in his mind that he's gonna come back and fight on the track. And not only did he decide to race again, he decided to fight for the world championship. It was crazy. The good thing for him was that during his absence, he missed just 2 races. So winning the title was still pretty much possible. Lauda didn't care that his vision was affected by the injuries he suffered, or that he couldn't see anything clearly on the track, or that the wounds were still bleeding under his bandages. The man still went on. A modified helmet for him to minimize the effect of those injuries, and the man went on to finish 4th in the race. It wasn't the result that a defending world champion wanted, but under the circumstances, it was as big as a win. This was some truly inspirational stuff. Unfortunately, he couldn't win the championship in the end, but it wasn't because he was defeated on the track. It was because he pulled out of the final race. Yup, Niki decided not to race in the final race of the season, the Japanese GP. F1 fans would know what the weather's like in Japan whenever it's time to race, and it was raining cats and dogs that day on the track. Lauda did himself a favor and pulled out of the race. Still, he was in the running for the championship because he lost it by just 1 point despite pulling out of the race. His comeback to the sport will be remembered forever, and Lauda's legacy still lives on, and it will live on till the end. Things like these don't happen every day in any sport in the world. It was against all odds. Niki defied all the laws of human belief that day. It was a true example of sheer will and determination. It just showed how much love he had for the sport and for driving. But that wasn't the end of the Ferrari legend. Lauda lifted the title next year in 1977, and then retired from the sport, only to come back and lift the title again in 1984. Sensational stuff. But talking about the incident, there's another tidbit you should know about. You see, Niki Lauda was against racing that day. No wonder the nickname for the Nürburgring is Green Hell. Not a lot of good comes out of racing on that 14-mile, 160-corner circuit.
Find another gear. And suddenly 5th gear was back, 4th gear was broken. I realized Then I said to myself, now I can drive slowly down to the pits.
Initially, Niki and some other drivers were against racing that day on the track because of some inadequate safety measures. He tried his best to somehow call the race off, but in the end, it all came down to a vote, and the Austrians lost by just one vote. Maybe it was bound to happen, cause his Ferrari only lasted one lap in that race. He crashed in the second lap, and the massacre happened. Although Niki had a laugh about his accident at a barbecue party at the Nürburgring, it was still a horror show. He even called his accident Grillfest am Ring, meaning Grillfest at the ring. At least he never lost his humor. In another interesting story, Lauda said there was a journalist who wanted to interview him at the scene of the crash. It was for the promotion of the Hollywood movie Rush in the Austrian driver's honor.
He says, why not? Without me, you cannot run the company. And therefore, I'm in this position now to ask you this. So I said, are you serious? Serious? I pay you.
Niki heard the woman say that the driver would cry while giving an interview at the scene. It might be too emotional for him, but that's not the man Lauda is. He's got nerves of steel. Lauda picked up a croissant from the hotel and hid it in the grass at the crash scene before the interview. And while everything was set for the interview, he stepped into the grass, picked up the croissant, and said, "Oh look, here's my ear." That's just absolutely hilarious. Speaking of his ear that was cut off, let me tell you exactly what injuries he suffered. Lost ear, third-degree burns, and so much more. The impact of the crash was so heavy that it knocked his helmet off, exposing his face directly to the fire. He suffered third-degree burns on the right side of his ear, lost most of his hair,
and put me in front of a mirror because she had to guide me there because my eyes was closed. And then she says, try to open your eye.
Plus his eyebrows and eyelids. But the most concerning part was his lungs, because of which he went into a coma. And what happened next was pretty interesting. Legend has it that there was a priest present with him in the room who gave Lauda his final blessing, which helped him not die. Niki himself said that it was because of that priest that he put in some extra effort to stay alive and get back on track. Whatever motivated him to come back on track, it gave us an opportunity to talk about a legend who will live on forever in the hearts of each and every Formula One fan. Unfortunately, it all came down to a sad ending in 2019. Niki Lauda said goodbye to this world. At the age of 70, in May 2019, Lauda left us with all his memories. Even after retiring, he was still a huge part of the sport and served as the team principal of Jaguar, and as a consultant before that for Scuderia. The Ferrari legend often said that people never liked looking him in the eye after the crash because of the way he looked. But even after so many years, we still remember his scarred face under a red cap. He remains an inspiration for all the young drivers making their way into F1. That's all for me on the inspiring story of Niki Lauda.